morning. Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Sorry, my lighting was a little bit off. I think
It's
that's
okay.
better
My
now.
lighting is really off as well, and so I apologize if it looks a bit
I'm so
shadow
close too.
shadowy.
Oh yeah, see,
How are
better.
you today?
There we go. Oh, it's been a very busy day. How
Yeah,
about
me
you?
too. I'm
Yeah.
doing okay, but the day just seems to have flown by, and it's really gloomy here.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
Spring is
Yeah.
coming.
It's pretty gloomy here too, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm very excited to welcome you to our IGTV Live today. So with that, I'll introduce myself. My name is Julia Slanina. I am the CEO and founder of Treehouse. At Treehouse, we work with amazing community partners like Aimee and many other experts in the field to be able to give them a voice on our platform to provide very informative, educational, and evidence-based medical information and health information from whatever stage you're at, whether it's at the preconception stage all the way into early childhood. And so today joining me is Aimee Tyler-Smith from Mama Baby Nutrition to talk about nutrition as a topic. We have some really great questions that we're going to go through today. But with that, maybe I'll let you, Aimee, introduce yourself and the amazing work that you do.
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to chat. And yes, as you said, we have lots of great questions. So lots to talk about today. A little bit about myself. So I am a registered dietitian with a private practice. I'm based out of Ontario. Right now, I run my practice virtually, which I'm loving. I mean, COVID has kind of sped that up in terms of just health and medicine in general is the acceptance of virtual care, which has worked really well because I have a specific type of client that I work with. It opens up those doors to seeing people who are in a larger geographical area, which is really nice. So within my practice, we focus on conception, pregnancy, postpartum, and infant nutrition as well, and supporting parents in introducing solids. I am a mom of two boys myself. One is almost 6, crazy to me, and the other one is 1. So we're busy, and I know what it's like to be a busy mom. So a lot of that really plays into the work that I do with parents, because I've been there and I've done it. And I think that plays a huge role in the connection that I'm able to make with clients. So I love the work that I do, and I'm so happy to be here to chat today.
Absolutely. And that's really why I even started this company, was just that prevalence of virtual health and having technology and tools to support amazing providers like yourself to be able to provide that care virtually. So our tools at Treehouse are really about building technology to support providers across Canada in order to deliver exceptional care. So before we get started, I will encourage those that are watching today to just click on that little arrow above my head and follow and subscribe to all the content that both Aimee and Treehouse delivers. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat throughout our discussion, and then we'll get to them at the Q&A at the end. So with that, let's get started. So our first question is, we're talking about foods for a healthy pregnancy today. And so our first question really talks about, what should I eat maybe daily while I'm pregnant?
Yeah, this is a really great question. And I find a lot of individuals get a little bit confused, especially during pregnancy, right? And their first pregnancy, mind you. In like, what can I eat? What should I eat? What can I not eat? Is there, like you said, is there something specific that I should be eating all of the time? And a lot of times too with nutrition, we like to think that it's black and white, and it's really not. There's a lot of gray, and having those kind of hard and fast rules isn't really ideal when it comes to nutrition. So from my perspective, there's not necessarily like one specific food or specific foods that someone needs to be including during pregnancy. We need to kind of take a step back a little bit. And the first thing that I really focus on clients in this stage of their life during pregnancy, number one, is making sure that they're getting enough nutrition. So there's a lot of really important nutrients And what's also important during pregnancy is that we're getting enough energy or enough calories, whatever unit we want to use to describe it. Because what happens and what some individuals might not recognize is that if our body is not getting enough nutrition, our body goes into a stress response. And one thing that we do know is that stress is one of those things that we really want to try to avoid as much as possible. I know it's very hard to eliminate altogether, but if we can avoid any type of stress, especially during pregnancy, it's very important to do that so that we're not placing that stress on our baby. So that's one of the first things that I focus on, especially when we think about certain stages of pregnancy. And a lot of individuals might face food aversions, or nausea is a big one, right? So focusing on, are we getting enough, number one, nutrition in general? Are we getting in enough energy, enough calories? And that's kind of the number one thing that I like to check the box with clients, is make sure, okay, let's look and see if you're getting enough. When we think about those nutrients, like I said, there's a lot of different nutrients that are really important during pregnancy. And one of those things that's really important as well is making sure we're getting enough fiber. So it's not really necessarily a specific food, but making sure that we're getting in enough foods that offer both types of fiber, so soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, in an enough quantity. And a lot of individuals don't get enough fiber just on a good day. So focusing on making sure we're getting enough fiber. We know constipation can be a huge issue for pregnant people. So that is one thing of focus. So it's not a specific food, but a type of nutrient. And then something else is also fluid. So our fluid needs are going to increase during pregnancy and even beyond if you decide to breast or chest feed. So making sure that you're getting adequate fluid. Again, another nutrient, not necessarily a specific food. Fluid comes from water and other sources, but just making sure that we're getting enough of both of those things. Really just including a wide variety of food when we think about food is important, because of all of those different nutrients that are important, the wider the variety of foods that we can include, the more likely we are to actually get all of those different nutrients, as opposed to focusing on making sure we're getting in that one certain food every day.
Right, exactly. Are there any particular, we're talking about a variety of nutrition and making sure that we have a diverse type of nutrition. I know the Canadian Food Guide has changed as well in recent years. Are there any types of fruits that are good for pregnancy and really help with that fiber intake as well?
Yeah, that's a good question, because one of the sources of fiber is fruits, right? So we can get a good amount of fiber from fruit. Yeah, when we think about the variety, there's different types of fruits that are available. And again, they're going to be offering different amounts of those different nutrients that are really important. For example, berries, those are really high in antioxidants, so really great for oxidative stress in the body. Again, we want to try to decrease stress where we can. Citrus fruits, for example, those are high in vitamin C. When we think about fiber, all fruits are going to give us fiber. Pears are an example of a fruit that's high in fiber. When we think about fruit, we think about, can we include the skin? That's just going to give us more fiber, or having a whole fruit as opposed to a fruit juice. Again, we're going to be getting more fiber from it. So again, it's not necessarily that we have to have one specific fruit over another. If there's certain fruits that you enjoy over others that maybe aren't as high in fiber, sometimes it's just trying something new, right? Once in a while, okay, I'm going to try to have a pear once a week or a couple times a week, so I know that I can bump up my fiber a little bit more. So just being open to kind of including a wider variety than maybe we get stuck in having the same ones over and over again. So that can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all experienced that a little bit. You spoke a little bit about hydration and making sure that you stay hydrated. This is, of course, important after you give birth as well. And sometimes can be a little bit overwhelming when you have a lot of pressure on your pelvis, especially in those later stages of pregnancy. How much water should we be drinking?
That's a really good question. And honestly, this comes up a ton with clients, because it's really easy to say you should be drinking this much,
Yes.
but a lot of times it's working on clients with those strategies of like, okay, this is how much I should be drinking, but how do I do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
When we think about the recommendation for pregnancy, for fluid intake is 3 liters in a day. And when we think about 3 liters, not necessarily all of that needs to come from drinking water.
Okay.
I would say about close to 2.5 of that,
Mm-hmm.
just shy 2.3 liters would be the recommendation, should come from water.
Mm-hmm.
We do get fluid from other things, right? So if you have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee in the morning, that's going to give you some fluid. We do get fluid, we get water from some of the foods that we eat, but a large majority of that ideally is going to come from water. So we want to think about that kind of 3 liter mark. And our needs do increase during pregnancy, right? Our blood volume increases.
Yeah.
So we need to increase our fluid intake in order to support our baby. And we also need to make sure we have enough to support the amniotic fluid that's built up. So there's important reasons. I know for a lot of people, this can be one of those big struggle topics. Like I said, of like, how do I do it? How do I go from this much water to that much water? And there are a lot of strategies that I will work on with clients of like,
Okay.
how can we fit this into your day specifically, because we're all different, right?
Yeah.
The other thing to keep in mind too, especially going into spring, we're not quite in summer yet, but hotter weather or movement, if you're sweating, those needs increase further. So making up for any fluid that's lost in sweat, whether it's hot weather or whether it's exercise or movement as well.
Mm-hmm. A very good reminder, especially as people start to travel again and get on airplanes and things, especially when they're
Mm-hmm.
up in the
Yes.
air. A lot of fluid. You get very
Yeah.
dehydrated up there. Um,
Mm-hmm.
again, so again, to remind our viewers that are watching, if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask away. We'll get to the Q&A towards the end of our discussion. And so with that, let's talk a little bit about vitamins and minerals. Of course, you want to have a diverse plate of food on for every
Mm-hmm.
meal, but sometimes you need to supplement. And so how do we do that when we're pregnant?
Yes, yes. So we've mentioned it a few times, right? Having that variety
Mm-hmm.
to making sure that we are getting in those vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytochemicals, all of those things that we get from all different foods. And different foods contain different levels of these different nutrients. So that variety, like you said, is key.
Yeah.
There are certain nutrients that are even more important, I guess we can say, during pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I recommend is a prenatal supplement. It is important. And if possible, I encourage individuals to start a prenatal supplement a minimum of 3 months before they're planning to conceive. I know it's not always realistic. Sometimes
Yeah.
we have surprises in life. But if it's something, I always just tell individuals, if it's something that you're thinking about or planning for the future, you can really start anytime. So a prenatal supplement is going to look different from just a regular multivitamin, for example, because it is going to contain some of those key nutrients that are a little bit more important during pregnancy. So one of those being folate or folic acid, you might also hear it called. I'm not going to get into the logistics of the difference of the two, but that is one of those nutrients that's very important during pregnancy, and it is recommended to supplement with it. So a prenatal supplement or prenatal multivitamin will contain a certain amount of folate or folic acid, but you can also work to maybe include or increase your intake in food as well. So for example, including more dark leafy greens. So maybe adding a spinach salad to your lunch or your dinner. Iron is another one that comes up. That's very important during pregnancy. When we move into the third trimester of pregnancy specifically, our baby will start to build up their own iron stores. And at that point, they're taking iron from us to build up those stores that are going to last them for their first 6 months of life. So iron is really important, especially as we progress through pregnancy. And really, we get iron from mostly animal-based foods. There are ways to get it from plant-based foods. That's the most bioavailable form. So if we have beef, for example, that would be one of the higher ones. Poultry is another one. So including, just making sure we're including regular sources of both animal-based, if we include them, and plant-based sources of iron as well.
And I think
sometimes I,
just sorry
yeah,
to
go ahead.
interrupt you, but I think just for iron as well, I think it's a good reminder even for after or even during delivery potentially because of the blood
Yes.
loss. I think it's a good reminder for those people to remember that as well.
Yeah, exactly. When in that third trimester, right, where our baby is building up their iron stores, and like you said, we lead into delivery, there is going to be blood loss. So we like to make sure that for parents, when we're getting closer to that point, that the parent who's delivering, that their iron levels are at a certain point, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we want them to be at a safe level, knowing that there will be, regardless of how the baby is delivered, there will be blood loss. So yeah, anticipating for that iron is very important. And typically as you progress through pregnancy, your providers will be checking your iron and your ferritin to see where your levels are at. So it's one that is monitored to make sure. So yeah, that is a very important point. Yeah. The other thing that I was going to say is sometimes it is good to consider that prenatal supplement isn't always going to meet everyone's needs. And I get
mm-hmm.
questions all the time about which prenatal supplement should I take? And it's honestly not that easy because everyone's needs are so different.
Yeah,
I can give kind of general recommendations, right? Like you want it to have iron and folate. And so there's kind of these general recommendations that we want to look for, but everyone is so different that sometimes it is necessary to take another additional supplement based on your intake, what you're getting from other supplements. So there's so many things that go into play, but trying to get some of these nutrients through food is also very helpful. It's important to know that we can't just rely on our prenatal supplement
right.
on its own. Yeah.
Right. And I think also a really good reason why you should be meeting with a registered dietitian and nutritionist throughout maybe your pregnancy or even before you're thinking of getting pregnant and even afterwards, because like you mentioned, a lot of these changes that are happening to your body can also fluctuate with the needs and the milestones that you're going through as a pregnant woman or even as a new parent.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's change subjects a little bit and go to once the baby has been born and we're no longer pregnant, and now we're thinking about maybe foods that we should avoid when we're either breastfeeding or chest feeding as a new parent.
Okay. Yeah. So when we're at that point, if we're choosing to, yeah, whether it's breastfeeding, chest feeding, or even if we are bottle feeding breast milk, um, we want to be kind of aware of what what we are eating, or a lot of parents are like, what does it matter what I eat?
Yeah.
And lactation, like how my milk supply, and also what the baby is getting from that milk, right? Because that's where all of their nutrition is going to be coming from for the first few months of their life. Um, so really, when we think about food avoidance, I don't often recommend avoiding foods unless
Mm-hmm.
it's purely out of safety, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
certain foods during pregnancy that we might say to try to avoid certain foods because of safety, or if you're allergic to a food, it's unsafe for you to consume it. So those things I hope are obvious, right? Like if you're
Mm-hmm.
allergic to something, don't eat it. But really, truthfully, when we can have a broader exposure of foods to your baby through milk, it's a benefit to your baby.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents are unsure about, should I avoid certain allergens? That seems to
Mm-hmm.
be a question that comes up a lot. And the truth is that no, you don't necessarily need to avoid any of those or restrict any of those allergens unless you are allergic to them yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we don't really know for sure, but there is the thought that it could be beneficial in exposing them to some of those foods even earlier on before we introduce solids. So
Mm-hmm.
including all of the foods that you enjoy, unless it's at a point where it is not safe for you, or in the instance of, for example, like a cow's milk protein allergy in baby, then we would have to eliminate dairy, and in some cases also eliminating soy. So I work with a lot of families on that because that can be really difficult to navigate
Yeah.
for families. But that would, of course, be one reason that I would recommend avoiding certain foods. There are foods that actually can help support lactation.
Okay.
So like
Yeah,
oats
we've
is a
talked
great
about that. Yeah.
example. I always tell parents, like, if you can make up some overnight oats and keep them in the fridge for snacks, or get someone else to make it for you. Making some of those energy balls that often have oats in them,
Mhm.
nutrient dense foods. Dates are another one that are really great. A lot of times when we see the like lactation cookies,
Yeah.
these are the ingredients they contain, right? Oats and dates, and brewer's yeast is another one. So those are things that can sometimes help to support lactation. So those can be helpful. A couple of things in terms of, again, safety that we
Mhm.
think of, or I guess not necessarily safety for caffeine. The recommendation is the same during pregnancy, to limit to 300 milligrams in a day. So if we think about kind of like takeout sizes, like a 12 ounce, I'm trying to remember what that would be, like a medium Starbucks, I think is like a 12 ounce.
12
That
ounce.
would be about 250 milligrams. So around that,
Okay, so one
medium
cup
grande.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, one.
Um, yeah. So that would be around that 300 milligrams. Um, some parents will have more, and really the thing to be aware of is changes in your baby. Some babies will react to even the 300 milligrams of caffeine through milk, and some will not. It could impact behavior, like they could be a little bit more restless, or
Mhm.
it could be more difficult for them to fall asleep. So
Mhm.
I just encourage parents to just watch, because every baby's going to be different, and just being aware that it could possibly impact your baby if you are having caffeine, period, and especially
Mhm.
if you're having more than that kind of recommended 300 milligrams. Um, the other thing that I get questions about is alcohol. And same thing, like it could impact your baby if you were to have, let's say, a glass of wine, and then you're feeding your baby. Some individuals will find that it might impact them, again, their ability to fall asleep, those sorts of things. Some parents might even find that it could impact supply.
Mhm.
Um, and really, kind of the best recommendation that I give parents is, like, if you want to have a drink, if you want to have a glass of wine, to feed your baby and have it directly after, or even just
Mhm.
as you're feeding, because it takes time for it to actually show up in the milk. So as close as you
Mhm.
can to after a feed, then it can get processed before you have another feed. um,
Okay.
so not necessarily something that you have to avoid. Lots of parents will choose to avoid it,
Yeah.
just because that's what they feel comfortable with, and that's okay too. But knowing that if you
Yeah.
want to have a glass of wine, then that's okay too.
Yeah.
Kind of just supporting
Absolutely.
parents in the decisions that they want to make.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Well, this has been a really fantastic. I think we've gone through so many different topics. I would encourage those who are here with us today live this afternoon to ask any questions if they have anything that's pressing. Aimee is here for everyone to answer questions and to just provide more insights. So before we really kind of end for this afternoon, I guess what I want to know is, there have been changes to the food guide in Canada.
Yes.
And so based on those changes on the food guide, maybe you can speak to how that relates to pregnancy and new parents as well.
Hmm. Yeah, the changes that have happened to the food guide, I'll be honest with you, I don't often use the food guide in my work. I eh, and I am familiar with the changes that have happened kind of when we look at the previous food guide, which was used
Yeah.
for years.
It was used
Um,
from like the 50s. Yeah.
yeah, like it was old. It was time
Yeah.
for a change.
Hmm.
And now just focusing on a few things. Not that I mean, I don't use this food guide specifically, but I feel like some of the things that come up in the food guide are things that I just use in practice naturally.
Yeah.
One of the things is like focusing on including more plant-based options, which is
Hmm.
something that I often will work on with clients, and kind of how
Hmm.
to do that. That can be a scary thing for people, especially when they're used to um, building meals around an animal product. So building
Yeah.
meals around a meat or poultry or fish. So I do support clients with that. In terms of how that relates to pregnancy, it is really important to include fish in a safe way, right? We want to avoid those fish that are higher in mercury. But those essential fatty acids, those omega-3s, are really important during pregnancy. So
Yeah,
I have
very
worked with
recommended.
a lot of clients who struggle with fish to how can we get it in?
Yeah.
And actually now that we're chatting about that, omega-3 is sometimes an additional supplement that individuals will take during pregnancy because maybe it is harder to get it through nutrition, through food. So that's one. So I do work on that a lot with clients, and just really looking at our whole plate as a whole, right? And just really
Yeah.
focusing on getting like lots of fruits and vegetables. And that is a great way to just even make sure like we're getting lots of fiber and including some whole grains. I mean, it's just kind of like this balance of variety, which, like I said, we talked about earlier, right? Is when we can include a wider variety of foods, it just really helps to make sure we're getting all of those nutrients rather than focusing on a few foods here and there. We're really just limiting in the amounts of those really important nutrients that we can get in.
Absolutely. So we've had two questions come in while you're speaking about this.
Yes.
Let's talk about fish and stay on that topic for a second, then we'll switch gears to the other viewer's question. And so can you specify which fish types are safe to consume while pregnant? Maybe some of them
Mm-hmm.
have better nutritional value. I know sardines, that's one aspect, but maybe you can talk a little bit more about seafood, maybe shellfish and fish as well.
Yeah. So, well, a few things that actually come up with fish and shellfish, because I feel like this comes up a lot with sushi too.
Yeah, of course. That's I
Yeah.
love sushi.
So, yeah. Um, so with that, again, we're thinking about safety, right? So it's definitely, I would say, unsafe to be consuming raw shellfish. When it comes to raw fish, well, I'll talk about the types in a minute, but when it comes to raw fish in sushi, the most important thing is if you're deciding to have that is that it's coming from a trusted source. I would say like don't be eating it from the grocery store.
Right.
It needs to be flash frozen, prepared properly. So it is still okay as long as you know that it's from a trusted source. The unsafe part about it is the possibility of food poisoning, foodborne illness, and so we want to make sure that we avoid that because of a decreased immune system during pregnancy. When we think about types of fish, so really we want to avoid those fish that are higher in mercury. So I think the question was which ones are safe.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
fish that are lower in mercury, that have higher levels of omega-3 ideally. So things like salmon is really great. I'm trying to think of like the ones that typically people would more likely have. So salmon, rainbow trout, anchovies you can have if you like them.
Yeah.
Some seafood,
Pickerel? Would
mussels,
pickerel?
oysters. Pickerel, I'm trying to remember that one.
I don't remember if pickerel has
Oh, I'm trying to
fine,
remember
but
that one.
yeah, that's
I'd have to look that one up.
a lot of pickerel in Ontario throughout
Yeah.
Canada. So.
I'll have to look that one up. I don't remember that one offhand.
Okay.
Um, Tuna. So if you're having like canned light tuna, but a tuna steak, for example, would be like higher in mercury.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there still are a lot that can be included. But some of the kind of high, why don't I say some of the higher ones? So like fresh tuna, like a tuna steak. Shark is high. I don't know how many people even eat shark, but
Yeah.
swordfish, marlin,
Very
and
high.
orange roofie. I think that's most of them those are the higher in mercury ones. So those would be the ones to avoid. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, what about fruit juices? So I've heard that I'm just speaking in the voice of of the
Yes.
individual who asked the question. I've heard that unpasteurized fruit juices are not safe during pregnancy. Does that mean that I can't make my own juice at home?
Okay, that is a great question.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so when we think of things that are unpasteurized, so this applies to like that whole thing about soft cheeses as well, right? So
Yes.
when we're looking at cheese or dairy products or juices, when something is unpasteurized, again, it's just that higher risk of foodborne illness. And we want to eliminate that risk during pregnancy as much as possible. Our immune system is weakened during pregnancy, and then we also take the risk of harming our baby. So anything that's unpasteurized, like in a package, you would definitely want to avoid during pregnancy to eliminate that additional risk. If you're making juice at home, so you're taking fruit that you bought at the store and you're putting it in a juicer and you're making juice, that's way different because it isn't something that's being processed and it's not pasteurized to like eliminate bacteria. It's the bacterial growth that we're worried about, right? Okay. So yeah, if that's what you mean, I'm not sure who asked that question. I know I see it here, but
Jake Madison, yeah.
So yeah, if that's what you're referring to, like having a juicer at home and buying fresh fruit or frozen fruit and making some juice, that's totally okay. Because that's no different than just eating the fruit. You're not, okay. There's no change to it. Yeah.
What if I'm a busy mom and I'm pregnant and I make my juice on Sunday and I make a big batch of it and I have it for the week? Is that okay if I'm keeping it in the fridge and I'm drinking it on a Friday?
I would say in terms of like, again, food safety,
I'm just giving you a scenario. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
That's a great question. Yeah. I probably wouldn't go that many days. Like you kind of have to think about like how many days do I leave something in the fridge where I still feel comfortable eating it. So like if you cut up an apple, for example, and you put it in the fridge on Sunday, I don't think you're going to be eating it on Friday because it's not going to look good. So it's going to be the same thing with your juice, right? It might be a little bit fermented too. So yeah, so a couple of days I would say would be okay. You're better off to just if you're making it fresh in your juicer, but no more than a couple of days, I would say 2 to 3 days, I would say at the most. Like you make it on Sunday, Tuesday, I would say would be like the last day. Just kind of thinking about how soon, like how long would I leave this in the fridge before I'd actually still eat it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Does another viewer is asking about kombucha. If you make homemade kombucha, that's a fermentation process there.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. One of my volunteers wrote a blog post talking about kombucha. And so with the fermentation process, the big thing is there is the risk that there's alcohol present. Because of that fermentation process. And really the recommendation is, this is all the work that I do with clients. Like I give you the information and ultimately you make your own decision. That's really the risk with kombucha. And even if you're making it on your own, that because of that fermentation process, there is the risk that alcohol is present. The recommendation is no alcohol during pregnancy because we don't know specifically an amount that is safe during pregnancy. So that's the information. Take with it what you will, and you can kind of make your own decision based on that.
Thank you. And thank you so much for everyone who's asking amazing questions
these are
today.
Great questions.
I think, Aimee, we're at the top of the hour here, and I think we've gone through some amazing topics. You've answered some very important and relevant questions. I think it's great for us to have this afternoon chat. So I thank you again from Treehouse on behalf of Treehouse for you making the time to chat about healthy foods during pregnancy. If you haven't done so, make sure you click that little arrow above my head and make sure you follow Aimee and her team at Mama Baby Nutrition. You are based in London, Ontario. If you have any questions or want to learn more, reach out to her directly or contact us and we'll put you in touch with her. Aimee, it's been a pleasure to have you today and we really look forward to working with you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. We had some great questions and it was awesome.
Thank you to everyone as well. So have a great afternoon and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.